Uber is taking major heat after pictures revealed separate bathrooms for drivers and employees of the company. According to reporting by Motherboard, at Uber facilities throughout the country, there are porta potties for employees and less refined stalls for everyone else.
One driver told the reporting outlet that they were shamed, even scolded, for trying to use an employee bathroom. Joining us to explain just how widespread this practice is and what's being done about it is staff writer at Motherboard, Edward Ongweso Jr. Great to have you, Ed.
Thanks for being here.
All right, so just lay this out. What exactly is going on here? What is the dynamic?
So I think the overall dynamic is something that Uber has had for a long time, which is sort of classist regard for its drivers. You know, internally for years, drivers were referred to as supply. And the working of itself is constructed to dehumanize them. So it's about, separating them from everyone else so that they don't really have to be in the same spaces, in the same rooms, or look at them, really. In some facilities, bathrooms are put out of sight so that drivers can't ask to use them. In others, despite the fact that they're high traffic and high volume, they're not allowed to use them, and they're explicitly told that they're not allowed to use them. And I think that this is a policy or unofficial thing, or, something that Uber will try to pass off as site by site, but it's too many facilities.
It's pervasive.
And it's indicative, right, of how they view the Uber platform versus the drivers. Can you talk a little bit about, there's this new California law, right, that's been passed on independent contracting. It basically said, Uber says we don't have to comply with that law in order to provide benefits to these contractors because they say we're not contracting with the drivers, we just create the platform on which they make money. I mean, it just shows how much they literally view drivers as widgets, ultimately. That is actually how they view the drivers themselves and a lot of their customers, but we'll get to that after this.
Yeah, I think Uber's business model relies on an attempt to say that everyone is an independent contractor. So in AB 5, they've been trying to establish or make statewide the ABC test to try to determine whether or not Uber has control over the labor that drivers are doing on the platform or on the app. And they do, because at the end of the day, Uber says it doesn't do anything, but Uber sets the prices. Uber tells them essentially who to accept and where to go and what prices that they have to accept, the fares that they're going to be doling out to customers. They control every aspect of the labor. They control the shifts that the drivers are in. There's really not an argument for the idea that it's just Craigslist, where you go on, you advertise your services, and you get matched with a customer who's in need of it.
Yeah.
No, their innovation, their disruption has basically been to undermine our labor laws. They also did this very disingenuous advertising in predominantly minority working class communities, basically touting the job creation benefits for these quote-unquote independent contractors. Meanwhile, we all know if automated cars were a reality, they'd be happy to toss all the drivers to the curb the moment that they could, and that's demonstrated. I mean, that's why this bathroom thing is so significant, because you have the office workers who are white collar, who are knowledge professionals, and then you have working class drivers who are clearly in every way treated as second-class citizens.
Yeah, and if you look at what Uber's core pitch is, over the years they've changed what it is that's going to make them profitable. First it was ride-hailing, then it was food delivery, then it was logistics, then it was scooters, and now it's going to be autonomous vehicles. But autonomous vehicles
and loans, right?
Yeah,
now they're giving loans.
Payday loans. Which
what could go along with that?
Yeah,
they did that at one point, and they stopped that system and sold it to another company because the drivers weren't able to pay the loans back because of the interest rates. And so,
so they were trying to extort their drivers. Even that's unbelievable.
And so now what they're trying to do is, the core pitch I think has been, we're going to make a monopoly, and then eventually we'll have autonomous vehicles, and we will get rid of the drivers. And so there's always been a sort of math or formula they're trying to work with where the drivers are expendable. I mean, like at its peak, the driver turnover rate was close to 95%. So they have an understanding that the app is there to mainly try to keep drivers on as long as possible so that they can eventually get to that point and earn enough money to get to that point.
And that is really the thing is, these drivers have they set the price, right? Like with no clarity whatsoever, no input. It's completely, so-called market demand, but it's not really. And I think this is an interesting story about Silicon Valley because Uber is a cool innovation, right? They didn't need to burn hundreds of millions of dollars on subsidized rides and promise the moon in terms of these huge profits. They had a very profitable idea, but it was in search of these kind of like crazy margins that now that that's what they're still experimenting with, because that promise is not going to get fulfilled. What do you think?
And I mean, like every investment's underwater. They've burned $25 billion since IPO. They're down 40%. None of that money is getting made back. So to do it, they're just going to get into more increasingly aggressive enterprises that are going to undermine public goods and communities all around the country.
Is Lyft any better?
I view them the same, and most drivers I talk to call them Uber Lyft because they're it's like the younger
same.
twin, you know?
Yeah.
So that's pretty much it. So no difference.
All right, Ed. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks.
We'll have more Rising for you right after this.